Perfect. Thank you for ever remember to click that. Awesome. We've got a really good program tonight. Here's a little bit of a look at the agenda. Tonight we're going to be focusing on local organizing. We're going to go over, first before that, getting over our norms and kind of an overview of what we're doing with this series. Again, we're going to talk about the importance of local organizing, why we're all here tonight. We're going to have a quick Q&A with Ricardo Martinez from Equality Texas. He's the executive director there. He's going to talk a little bit about a couple of the anti-LGBTQ plus bills that were passed last session and how we're fighting back against those at the local level. Then we're going to get a quick Q&A from Dick Levine, who is the senior fiscal analyst with Every Texan. He's going to talk a bit about a new elected position that will be on the ballot this May 4th election. And it's going to be on in all 254 counties across the state and has huge implications for public education. And lastly, we're going to hear from Eve Margolis. She's with Access Education Round Rock ISD, and she's going to talk about how parents, educators, and the community at large join forces to give educators a raise in Round Rock ISD this past November. So awesome if you can. Oh, and then lastly, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get involved and make change in your local community. So if we could get to the next slide. Awesome. So I'm not going to read all over this, but I hope that we'll leave it up for a second so you can read it. Basically, the crux of it is definitely we want to be treating people with kindness, treat other people like human beings, and if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Awesome. And yeah, here are just to go over again our kind of norms, rules for this space. Pretty basic stuff. We're going to make sure everyone stays on mute so we can have the discussion in the chat. But we want to really get through. We've got a pretty jam-packed agenda this evening. We want to get through that. Your Zoom display name, we definitely want to make sure everyone so far has, but we want to make sure that they match with your meeting registration. And lastly, we want to definitely assume best intentions, again, treat people with kindness, assume, that everyone's good, but we also want to, be reasonable and thinking through our interactions in the chat. So definitely want to go over those rules. And if we can go to the next slide. Awesome. And this is a little bit for kind of tone setting for the evening. This is a quote that we added in, talking about the importance of democracies in our schools. So for public schools and our educators to thrive, we must build a thriving democracy here in Texas. And that starts with what we do best, education. Education and democracy are obviously very, very linked in our society. So definitely wanted to set the tone there. And if you go to the next slide. Awesome. So these are the next few episodes in our series. We've got this one about local organizing. We've got in 2 weeks, we've got one about education and democracy. All the ones upcoming throughout April and May. And this one, of course, is available for CPE credit. So at the end of the session, we'll send out a form that people can fill out to receive that CPE credit. Make sure you fill out that QR code on the right. You can scan it with your phone to sign up for all the upcoming sessions on Mobilize. Awesome.
Hey, Eli, before we move on, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you mind if I try a new screen share or something? Because that's why the slide deck keeps moving on its own.
Of course, of course.
And we'll get that QR code back up for people to scan. Just give me 1 second. I apologize.
No, absolutely. It's not Zoom if there aren't at least one technical difficulty. Awesome. Well, while Marco's doing that, we can kick off the Q&A. Just we're going to run a little poll for everyone to kind of see where everyone's coming to the session with. So I'm going to drop the poll now and give me a thumbs up, Sierra, if you can see it. Yeah, we're just going to drop a quick poll and with a couple of questions on the topics of today's session. So First off, do you know how your school district voted on implementing SB 763? Do you know what SB 763 is? Have you heard about it before? Two, do you know the date of your next school board election? And three, this one I like a lot. Do the words Central Appraisal District mean anything to you? Hopefully by the end of the night, it will. Awesome. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes to go through that. Awesome. And feel free to chime in on the chat too if you have any thoughts on any of these questions. Kept it yes, no, but I'm sure there's a lot of nuance in some of these answers for some of y'all. Marco, do we have slides up?
Yeah, so I couldn't figure out what the problem is, so I would ask people to just bear with me. If they move automatically, I'll put them back to where they need to be.
Perfect.
Couldn't figure it out, sorry.
Awesome. So yeah, this is your little pop quiz. And we can get to the next slide. Awesome. So we're gonna just, again, to tone set a little bit, we're gonna have a quick clip from the one and only Jon Stewart about the importance of being, that silent partner and making difference in your community. Marco, if you could click the video.
I've learned one thing over these last 9 years, and I was glib at best and probably dismissive at worst about this. The work of making this world resemble one that you would prefer to live in is a lunch pail job, day in and day out, where thousands of committed, anonymous, smart, and dedicated people bang on closed doors and pick up those that are fallen and grind away on issues till they get a positive result. And even then have to stay on to make sure that result holds. So the good news is, I'm not saying you don't have to worry about who wins the election. I'm saying you have to worry about every day before it and every day after, forever. Although, on the plus side, I am told that at some point, the sun will run out of hydrogen.
Awesome. So on that very positive note, I'm going to pass it over to our Director of Public Affairs, Patty Quinsey, to talk a little bit about this new report that we got from the ACLU of Texas.
Thanks so much, Eli, and thanks to everyone for tuning in this evening. Great to see y'all, and thanks for your time. If you did not know the answers to those questions we just asked, do not feel embarrassed or ashamed, because there's a reason you don't know those. People keep that a secret. There's a tremendous amount of information to keep up with when it comes to our government and our schools and our democracy, and there's a lot of folks out there misrepresenting things and spreading misinformation. So that's why this series is here. But I hope that those questions help underscore a point. What happens locally really, really matters. Yes, it's an election year, and we all need to be focused and informed on the issues at stake on the state and national levels. But at the local level, there's some issues that really directly affect us and the kids that we all serve. So we can't solely just be focused on those big issues that make state and national news. In the series so far, we've talked about statewide issues and problems stemming from the legislature and also from the governor's ability to appoint a tremendous amount of powerful people here in this state. But I guarantee you there are issues affecting the quality of life for educators and students that can be solved locally right now. One of those issues we want to highlight, thanks to the tremendous work of the ACLU of Texas, is discriminatory dress codes. There's been a hot topic recently in the news. You might have heard about a young student from Barbers Hill ISD. His name is Daryl George, and Mr. George was wearing his hair in locks, and the principal at his school didn't like that, and he refused to cut his locks, rightfully so. he was expelled, even though there is a Crown Act on statute right now that's supposed to prohibit any kind of discriminatory actions against a student for wearing their hairstyle in a certain way. But what the courts and the school district reasoned was, well, we didn't do it because of his texture of his hair. We just didn't like the length of his hair. Now, we all know what that means. When there's anti-discrimination statutes on the books, people kind of find a way around it. So there's really important things that we have to be involved in the local level, because that bad policy at Barbers Hill ISD was set at the local level, at the school board. Parents, students, community members could have had a say in that and can still have a say to change that. But it's more than just that situation. Our friends at the ACLU have just put out a new report that shows more than half of Texas schools have dress code policies that shame and penalize for simply showing up to a classroom. They penalize kids. And we know that a lot of these kids tend to be kids of color. So 53% of the districts that the ACLU surveyed force students to follow dress codes rooted in outdated gender norms and stereotypes, including boys only hair length rules and other rules that only apply to girls. Over 7% of the dress codes that were in place in the 22-23 school year, they banned race-based hair textures and styles just straight out, which are now explicitly protected by the Crown Act for the upcoming years. But again, we see that the Crown Act needs to even be beefed up some more to prevent some folks trying to work around it. But more than 80% of the districts have vague hair policies, again, that are used to police and disproportionately affect students of color, especially young Black women. They tend to get the brunt of these policing of bodies. But more than 80% of districts also prohibit head coverings, many without naming religious or cultural exemptions. So these are really far outdated policies that we need to change right now. Almost 80% of the districts have rules prohibiting worn or frayed or missized clothes. I don't know about you, but if you grew up with not a whole lot of money, you went to school with frayed clothing, you went to school with tight shoes on, or too big shoes that were handed down. But these disproportionately affect low-income students. And this is just another way that, schools aren't serving all of kids' needs by penalizing how they even dress. So let me ask you this right now. Do you have a student or a child affected by this? Are you an educator who's forced to be the arbiter of a stupid dress code or an arbitrary vague dress code? Share your story. And this report the ACLU report has a letter and a template for advocacy. And it's step-by-step guidelines on how to file a grievance at your local school board level and how to address this locally. Again, this is just one example of an issue that you can get involved in at the local level to improve working and learning conditions in your neighborhood schools. And remember, when a kid feels welcomed at school, they're going to show up, they're going to be happy, they're going to be ready to learn. So, I mean, this is just another barrier that we put in kids' way that we need to remove. But now we're going to hear about several more issues that are great and important at the local level. First, I want to introduce Ricardo Martinez, who leads up Equality Texas, which is a fantastic ally organization that works on issues affecting all LGBTQIA Texans. And Ricardo is a regular at the Capitol starting. There was pep rallies, marches, just so much going on around the session to protect kids, trans kids, gay kids. And Ricardo was at the forefront of it all. So we are really proud to be in the fight with Ricardo and Equality Texas. And he's here to talk about two bills that he spent a lot of time fighting off in the 88th legislature. But these bills happen to affect people at the local level. The first one is Senate Bill 763. That was a bill that would have allowed chaplains, people with no counselor experience, no pedagogy experience, to come into schools and replace counselors, which, we know is all kinds of bad ideas. But he also worked against HB 900, which is the book banning bill. This is where we're seeing far-right people show up at their school boards, be very amplified, be very loud, and say that some books are sexually explicit for kids. And these authors tend to be Black and brown authors. They also tend to be about gay and lesbian experiences. So there's a very kind of pointed attack that these bills are coming for and coming from. So question for Ricardo, first of all. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us this evening. I do want to ask you, Ricardo, off the top, all districts had to vote on whether or not to implement SB 763 by March 1st, and we just got past that date. Can you explain what you all did to prepare for that, and how did that shake out for Equality Texas?
Yes, I will answer in a second, but first I just want to give a really big shout out and thank you to all public school teachers, all teachers, period. I am a proud product of public schools. I went to elementary school, junior high school, all in public schools, and every single one of my teachers were amazing, but there are a handful of them that like pushed me in the direction of doing the work that I'm doing today. And if it wasn't for them, their intervention, their affirmation of my softness and just being myself, even if I wasn't out when I was younger, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I am incredibly indebted to teachers everywhere, and I'm incredibly proud to be here with y'all today. Yes, we passed that March 1st deadline for SB 763. And this analysis was created by the Students Engaged in Advocacy Texas, SEAT. This is one of the incredible stories of what can happen in empowering people through adversity, right? These young people took it upon themselves to really get engaged, educated, and push back against this. And they did this incredible analysis over 750 Texas school districts, and they found that at least 59 of those districts were leaning against using chaplains for mental health support or general support, volunteerism services or programs. And at least 56 of the districts were leaning in favor of using chaplains for support services and programs. Of the top 25 districts, the majority of them voted against it. And then there were a lot of districts that didn't vote at all. And because there is no enforcement mechanism that says that you have to take a vote by March 1st, it's kind of ambiguous as to what happens next, right? Some may take a vote, some may re-vote if they feel pressure. So like local advocacy is incredibly important because of that, right? Nothing is really set in stone, and depending on who is at the helm in terms of power means that there are impacts directly to advocacy. So I know that my Austin ISD voted against and rejected this this agenda item, which is great. But there have been a number that have actually passed it.
Thank you. And it was a relatively low number, is what I understand. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
And what was their reasoning for why they did this? Do you know? Was it usually the rural or kind of, it was the excuse that it's hard to find counselors? Because that's something we hear sometimes.
I think, so I don't have reasons for every single one of the districts that pass it, right? So we have to make some assumptions as to why. I think part of it is the reason that you gave, that people feel like there's not enough capacity within a school building. So bringing in counselors just or chaplains, not necessarily to replace counselors, but to fill in a gap of services that may lean to have them take on administrative or programmatic responsibilities that mimic counselors could occur, right?
Yeah. But yeah, and
So-
thanks for the reminder that the work is still ongoing, that there's still a chance to change some of this at the local level.
I think that's something that somebody mentioned earlier, and it might have just been The Daily Show, right? And Jon Stewart is saying that we have to continue to show up. I think there's a fragility to progress, right? In either direction. So we can continue to move and want to affirm and respect every single young K through 12 student. But there's going to be forces that are pushing back. And so we have to continue to show up, not only to create, but sustain the process and progress that we make.
Yeah, yeah. And along those lines, can you talk a little bit about HB 900? I know it's been in and out of courts recently. Where do things stand in implementing this book banning bill right now?
Yeah, so HB 900 is one of the 7 anti-LGBTQ bills that actually made it through the legislative, the last legislative session. Just to do a bird's eye view, over the course of the last 2 sessions in 2021 and 2023, there have been over 200 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been filed, which is more than the number of bills that were filed in 2015, 2017, 2019, and 2021 combined. And so the marked increase over the course of the last few years has just felt palpable and has really put a tremendous amount of pressure and I think heaviness to folks that are engaged in this fight, right? HB 900 particularly was a bill that just essentially erased the lived experiences of LGBTQ folks. The stories that center Black and LGBTQ protagonists, Black and brown protagonists. As a result, book vendors filed a lawsuit asserting that HB 900 violates free speech, which is guaranteed by the First and 14th Amendment. Most recently, through the courts, the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision that struck down the requirements that book vendors have to rate library materials as sexually explicit or sexually relevant. But the decision states that the enforcement of the library standard requirements was not part of the district court's preliminary injunction. So a lot of HB 900 still stands and the case remains ongoing, right? So depending on where you are, depending on kind of the hostile landscape, depending on who is in positions of leadership, which is why local elections are supremely important. It really depends on where you live, who is in a position of power, how this is being enforced, and how it's really trickling down to your local libraries. But there are examples.
It seems like some districts are overreacting to the bill, even, prematurely pulling books from their shelves. What are some of the patterns you've seen of some of the districts out there that haven't gotten any kind of real guidance from the state?
So even before HB 900 went into effect, I think it's important to note that these things were already happening, right? They were vigilantes that took it upon themselves to put pressure on librarians and educators to force them to comply with their demands, which is to ban books of folks that look like me, that have lived experience like me, right? In North Texas, in Fort Worth ISD, they closed their libraries for 2 weeks just to start pulling a lot of these books and have taken, I think, over 120 books off the shelves, which is interesting because, when you think about North Texas and when you think about Patriot Mobile and the millions of dollars that have been poured into local school board races and the candidates that have subsequently won, they're the ones that are pushing these, or some of the ones that are really pushing these vocally. So there is pressure from Christian nationalist groups, including Citizens Defending Freedom, that are really pushing and putting pressure, which makes people act, right? When you're in a position where you feel like your sense of safety is in question, you're going to try to either avoid it or get it done as quickly as possible, right? And comply, which is awful to be in a place where you are a dedicated public servant, just trying to teach young people or to inspire them through story and literature. And to have this happen is just so appalling. Meanwhile, in Keller, one book about a little Black girl getting a new hairstyle and another one about two dragons, one of the parents being lesbian, were also targeted for removal. Conroe ISD has already banned over 50 books. Katy ISD placed the power of banning books solely on the hands of their school board, which is, these are folks that don't necessarily have the expertise to be making decisions, but arbitrarily are now making them on a whim. That's a tremendous amount of power to grant. In terms of patterns, there are anti-LGBTQ extremist groups that try to intimidate communities that we've seen across very many parts across the state, not only in North Texas. There are other hotspots like Houston, the outskirts of Austin proper. Extremist school board members were recently elected, and you're seeing some of these, again, as I mentioned before, continue to support this plan of removing books, but ultimately, I think, defunding public education through vouchers.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's, weird that teachers have been dragged into these culture wars and are being called woke and groomers and all the like. But again, all of this manufactured chaos is, just to distract from the real problem, which is the consistent underfunding of our schools. So,
And I know that there's some retired teachers that are on this call now, and they are not new to this, right? Like
oh, yeah.
when we think about just the formula that has been used time and time again, it is important just to note that the reason why we see the same formula being used is because it's effective, right? In the 70s, during the Anita Bryant days, they were, what ended up happening was they take something about our community that they don't understand. Think about drag queens. That the public at large wouldn't necessarily understand. They take that knowledge gap and they insert disinformation or misinformation in hopes that it leads to hysteria. Once it leads to hysteria, they use that hysteria as a reason to legislate against us, and then they do it all over again, right? So this is a blueprint. It is effective, but it is our job to push back. This is the same thing that happened during the 80s with the AIDS epidemic. This was the same thing that happened in the 90s with the Don't Say Gay light, or at the time it was called the No Promo Homo laws that passed all across the country. We're seeing it replicated in 2020. The only thing that is different is that there is like kerosene in social media that really helps proliferate all over the state and all over the country. So this is not new. This is something that is being done intentionally, and everybody's action or inaction impacts our ability to stop this.
Well, before I let you go, Ricardo, we're putting a link in our chat so folks can tune in and volunteer with Equality Texas. But before you go, what can folks on this call do to plug into the fight that you all are still fighting ongoing around this?
I think number one is education, right? So if you are unfamiliar with how HB 900 or SB 763 impact our communities, or the other 5 that ended up passing last year impact our communities, our social media handles are probably the best way to educate yourself. One step at a time, right? It can be really overwhelming to tap into all of the ways that politicians are being awful to us, but it is important just to remember that there are thousands of people all across this state fighting against what we're seeing, this extremism. There are thousands of people who are committed to upholding our democracy and improving upon it, right? So I just want folks to follow us on social media, get plugged in, volunteer when you can, how you can. And if you need resources or ways that you can support and affirm the lived experiences of LGBTQ young people in schools while still following the law and not being afraid to maybe overcorrect, we're happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for your time, Ricardo. I'm sure we'll see you soon. We're always working together. Take care. And thanks so much for the great work you do.
Thanks, y'all.
Next up, our next speaker is going to be Dick Levine with Every Texan. And let's see, is Dick coming up? There he is. And Dick is, for anyone who's been around the state capitol, he needs no introduction. He is a senior fiscal analyst at Every Texan, a nonprofit policy institute dedicated to economically uplifting all Texans, and also a union shop they've organized. So we're very proud of that. Dick is also the preeminent expert on school finance and Travis County appraisal and property taxes. I mean, he's an expert in so many things. He also happens to be running for a seat on the Travis County Appraisal District Board. So what is that? Why does it matter? How does it affect your neighborhood? Thanks for being with us here tonight, Dick.
Yeah, thanks, Patty, and thanks, Eli. Thanks for inviting me here. I'll do my best. I'll be honest, I have to run off to the Central Labor Council to get their endorsement, which is, of course, key to the race. This is a first-time election for the appraisal districts. I should start at the beginning. What the appraisal district does is it appraises the value of your home. That's the basis on which the tax rate set by the school board or the city or the county is applied to you get your tax bill. So if you were a homeowner, you in April are going to get what's called a notice of appraised value, telling you what the appraisal district thinks is the market value of your home. If you think they're wrong, you get to protest. In Travis County, you can do it online. Or if you want to go talk to somebody in person, you can have what's called an informal conference with an appraiser, an employee of the district. And if you're still not satisfied, you get to go to the appraisal review board. The appraisal review board is a group of citizens that sit in panels of 3 to hear your protest. They hear the appraisal district present their case, you present your case, they make a decision. And unless you're willing to go to court, which is really expensive, that's pretty much the end of the line. So who is on the appraisal review board is really key. The review board is now being appointed by the board of directors. Under the new law, there are 3 newly created positions on the board, replacing some of the positions that in the past had all been appointed by the school district or the cities or the counties or community colleges. What's key about this is that in order to be appointed to the appraisal review board, you need the support not just of a majority of all the directors, but specifically 2 out of the 3 elected officials. So if the wrong people get in there, they essentially have a veto over who sits on the ARB, who hears your protests, who makes these final decisions. And they can screw up school financing really, really badly. Because as you know, and as may have happened in some of your districts, the controller has what's called the property value study. And they come in and they, using their own data, determine whether they think the appraisal district was correct, or at least close enough to correct in setting the values. If they disagree, they are going to set your state aid or your recapture payments based on what they think you should be collecting. But you're only collecting on the lower values that came out of this distorted ARB, and you go into the hole. What did I see? Conroe's having trouble. Montgomery County's having some trouble. I mean, this can be serious business, and school districts don't, as I have to tell you, have no cushion to fall back on. So that was really quick and dirty, but that's the key to the whole thing. These elections are being held on Saturday, May the 4th. There are a lot of school board elections, actually. I know here in Travis County, there's quite a few, and mayors and other smaller city councils. So the turnouts will be mainly from people where there are school board elections, which means those are the people we most need to talk to about these newly elected positions. In Travis County, there are 3 of us. There's 3 places, each one runs countywide. 3 of us have joined together to sort of form a slate. The other side, more or less, has formed a slate. They have the chairman of the Republican County Committee, a former nut-wing city council member, and the head of the Libertarian Party. So you can see where they're coming from, and we've got to stop them from getting anywhere close to the levers of power. There it is.
Thank you. And I think Eli's got some questions. Eli, you want to take it away?
Awesome. Yeah, I'll be quick. I know you've got to go run to the CLC. But I guess maybe this one can be a little bit longer and then another quick one after. What would be the risks if an anti-education, anti-public education candidate, or just a bad actor generally took control of a CAD board? What would be the risks to public education?
They wouldn't even need control of the board, because the appointed positions are still appointed by the school districts in the city and the county. It's these 3 elected positions. 2 out of 3 have to approve every appointment of each individual to the ARB. If they get their own types in, I mean, not only will they maybe lower the values and then flunk the property value study, or they may decide that the people who come in person and can afford a lawyer should get a break, but people who can't take time off from work to come in and protest shouldn't. Or the downtown office buildings where they have a lot of vacancies, those poor things, they should get a break, but your average mom and pop business should not. So there's the equity issue, and then there's also the school funding issue, and they could mess up both ends.
You're muted, Eli.
Oh God, that's great for time. Talking on mute. What can union members do locally to ensure that pro-public education candidates are elected to CAD boards across the state on May 4th? And for example, what do you need in your race?
Well, I doubt in this race we're going to have candidate forums. It's sort of such a low profile race, and also therefore low turnout, so that a few votes, I mean, I know you always hear this, but every vote is really going to make a difference, because many people in other parts of the county, especially if they don't have school board elections, aren't even going to know this exists. So the least you can do is find out who's running. They should be posted on your appraisal district's website. Look into their web pages. Mine's very clear about what I want to do. I want to have fair and accurate appraisals, run the district efficiently, etc., and judge for yourself. And then let your members know. I mean, that's it. Is first let them know there's an election, and then let them know who the good guys are.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dick. We'll let you go, but we really appreciate you for running and really appreciate you for jumping on.
Yeah, sorry I have to run. Explaining the whole deal would take another 20 minutes. I'm happy to do that any other time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Dick. And Dick's got some excellent reports you can find on the Every Texan website too, if you want to know even more about this. But yeah, it's just a really kind of a racket the way the central appraisal districts work and how businesses get away with not paying their fair share. Next up, we've got our third speaker, Eve Margolis with Access Education in Round Rock. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for coming tonight to speak about a successful local campaign that will be very heartening for educators on the call. Eve is the advocacy chair for Access Education in Round Rock ISD, a self-organized group of over 100 parents and community members across multiple Round Rock ISD learning communities. Their goal is to do everything in their power to help school districts succeed and to support their children. Eve is here to discuss Prop A, a ballot measure successfully passed this past November, that guaranteed pay raises for all Round Rock ISD employees when the legislature did nothing. So, Eve, welcome.
Thank you. We are also lucky enough to have the current president of Access, Jenny Burkholz, is here. So yay, thanks for making time, Jenny. And I'm sure she will chime in whenever there's something that I didn't cover or something good to add. So the question I got from Eli, and tell me if this is still something you would like to hear, is what is Prop A? And I think
what did it do? How well did it do at the ballot box too?
It did well. Jenny, do you happen to know the percentage that it won by? I was looking for that and I couldn't find it, but I don't think it was close. So our community outreach is pretty reliable. And I think that's a big part of what the question was. One thing that we did was we collaborated with the district. And that's something that has really helped us. It helped us with the school boards as well, is going to, for Vader, or we called it Vader. It was Prop A. Vader is the voter approved tax rate election that the board has to vote to get on the ballot. So in order for it to even be on the ballot for people to vote for, it has to be, you have to have enough school board members who will pass it. We had 5 out of 7, which is our, general balance, and who voted to have it there. So that's one thing that has to happen. And for that, we had our CFO of the district. He had presented at board meetings a couple of times about what the issue was with giving raises and how even with the cutbacks that the district did, they weren't able to give teachers raises because the state didn't give that money to the district. So that's a huge thing to get across to people, is that the district does not have control over how much money they get. And that is something that you hear all the time. Well, the district gets all this money. Why don't they fire the people that make all the money, fire the superintendent, do all of those things. They need to understand how that works. And we have some things written up that I can share about how we answer those questions. So that's how it got on to the board, onto the election, because the trustees voted to get it there.
Yeah, so you had to do some organizing just to get it on the ballot, and so what exactly did that look like? How did you form, and how did you get the word out that you're a new organization, and you know, what opportunities were there for people to join?
Well, we were lucky because it wasn't a completely new organization. We had organized the year before to get the 5 trustees elected. And which is how then we got the Prop A on there. And so that organizing was, it's really word of mouth. So I can talk a little bit about how Access was formed, and how we use that game plan to help us with.
Yeah, I guess what we're really kind of wondering about, and I think the people on the call would like to hear about, is how can parents and educators on this call who want to do the same thing that you've done, how can they do that in their local community? What does that entail?
Well, a lot of how it started is word of mouth. And ways to get that is, of course, find parents in your area and community members that have specific concerns. There were a lot of parents that had specific concerns about the special ed and what was available and not available to their students. People that have some kind of personal connection, information, complaint, something to connect with the district, and you will find them. You can find them, you know, people that you meet. You can find them on any social media, which is, I believe, how it started growing. Jenny, I think it started with just a handful of people who were focused on that. Isn't that right? Do you recall that?
Yeah, so Access Education actually started as a group of parents back during COVID, and we were really concerned about the masking and the lack of support for masking in our district. And so it brought parents together around an issue that they really cared about. And we just kind of kept evolving, right? We are an emergent group. So as people become concerned about something, we kind of turn towards that issue and our efforts go towards that. So when we started getting Moms for Liberty in our school boards or things like that, it kind of showed the extremism that we had. So then it brought even more cohesive with our parents, and we were able to go out and educate them, bipartisan, you know, this is what's really happening in your schools. The news may be saying this, but this is what's really happening. And so through our own social media videos that we make, through our own communication channels, through relational organizing, all of those sorts of things, we really got to educate folks about what really does happen at these school board meetings and what is just, you know, news clips or what. So,
and that's really important what Jenny is saying about connecting with the school board and getting people involved. We have to get people to the school boards, and that's where you find people that are interested. I suggest going to the district, either their website or something, see what committees there are. There's a lot of committees made up of community members that they don't really advertise for, but get involved in the district. Somehow you will really find people that are involved in that. Or like me, I wasn't involved in the district so much, but I was involved with the parents, and now I'm more involved in the district. So finding that, and then the way that we would continue getting people involved, it's when there is an issue, like Jenny said, there was masking, and then there were the Moms for Liberty who wanted to get on the school board. So we organized through social media and through We made literature and videos and yard signs, and we had to do some fundraising. But there were a lot of different ways that we shared information.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've really built your power. I mean, from your start too, and it's growing. And I guess as you become more successful, you're probably getting more interest in people joining you as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so. And one thing that I found was that it's really important, like Jenny said, is to be nonpartisan so that we are open to everybody, and to make sure that we stick to the topics, because there are people that will come in that are interested in having teachers that are paid well or keeping art in the school, but they may not agree with all these other stands that you take.
Yeah.
And so, not that you have to hide it, but personally, I found it challenging to stay focused on the task of keeping the school board pro-public education when there are so many other issues. So it's important to make sure that you keep it open for everybody. And
Yeah.
that allows Republicans to join you too.
Exactly. And we've had the same experience at the state level, even, talking to people we might not otherwise agree with, but really public education is not a partisan issue. And especially if you're talking about waste and inefficiency, some of the conservatives really kind of love that and love talking about that. But yeah, it's really important that people just understand what goes into our local school districts and that we're a part of it and that we can become a part of it. In fact, you're getting a little bit ahead of our next few slides. We're going to talk about people getting involved at their school district level and providing a toolkit for folks to get involved. So before I let you go, I just want to say thank you so much to the work that you and Jenny are doing, because the work you do not only, of course, affects working conditions, but ultimately improves learning conditions for all kids. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on here, and thanks for the great work y'all do.
And I just want to say thank you to our local union. Tammy Conrad has always been a wonderful partner to us, even with this past election for Prop A for our Vader election. We worked very, very closely with her on the language and what would resonate with everybody. And we all walked together. We all shared resources together. And that is what it's about, right? Finding all your partners in your community that have this shared values of this, and you're not fighting, you're working, and using your resources and your talents wisely. So I just want to give a shout out to Tammy. She's wonderful partner for us.
Thank you so much for that. And you're right. And thanks for working with the union and realizing that we're all in this together and we're all just trying to help kids. So thanks again, ladies, for joining us. Appreciate your work.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, next we're going to talk about, where do I start? How can you get involved at the local level? And thank you again to all of our three guests. It's really important to see that there's varying issues that you can get involved with at the local level. But of course, school boards are most directly where our bread and butter is made and or taken. The thing about the school board races and school board elections, like primary elections, they're very, very low turnout elections. So that's kind of good and bad. It's bad in the sense that more people aren't involved, but it's good in the sense that we really have an opportunity to elect the best people at our school boards. So going to school board meetings, let's talk about that for a minute. If you answered that you did not know who was on your school board, or that you don't know who or what committees there might be, I think that Eve mentioned, you can go to their website and see exactly who is on your school board right now. And the great thing about that is a lot of times you'll recognize some people. You might not know they're on the board, but you might recognize someone from church or some other kind of community activity or hobby you're involved in. So do make sure you do that. Get to know who exactly is on your board. You might already know them, but also look at those committees. Look when they're filling positions for committees, because again, these are things you have access to as an educator, as a parent, but these are things that are often not advertised very loudly because, sometimes they want the most go along to get along people to join. So it's really important that you stay up there. and pay attention to what's on their website, because they always post their board agenda. And remember, this can be something as important as a dress code, or some kind of, new way they want to look at books or review books. So always pay attention to what's on the board agenda, because so many of these things affect you personally. And these policies are set by the people who participate, whether it's the Moms for Liberty or, whether it's us, the people who really care about kids and who are on the front lines. Right now, in too many districts, the people participating are extremists. Sometimes they're not even from the school district. So if you've never engaged in your school board, it can feel intimidating or boring, but we've created an eyes on the board set of worksheets to help you take notes on the items that matter and plan what to do next. Now, to walk you through the worksheets that Marco has up here, thank you. You can use these to take notes during the board meeting on the major topics discussed, and also plan on what to do next. And you can discuss or write down what each board member had to say about them, because it's always fun to follow up with someone and say, and it's flattering to some of these people really, to say, hey, so you mentioned this book that you're worried about. Well, I've actually read it and I'd like to talk to you about that. Or, any number of things that someone might just mention offhand. Find a way to relate to these people, because presumably they're in it to help kids too. So they need to hear from the parents and the educators who are on the front line. Now you can use these also to help you understand not only what's happening in your district, but who the stakeholders are. Just being at the school district or the school board meetings, you'll notice who shows up. And sometimes they aren't the best people. And those aren't the people that the board needs to be listening to. So just showing up, making yourself seen and heard are so important. And even when we have local organizing issues that we're organizing around, just showing up in a t-shirt with the union's logo on it is important and shows the strength in numbers and that people are paying attention. Now, something that's coming up that is really important is ISD budgets. They're going to start preparing for that. They're going to start reviewing it and voting on it throughout April, May, and June. So this is your opportunity to make your voice heard and what your district students really need. So please use your voice to remind the powers that be that those students need well-paid, fully supported, certified educators and a team of well-paid, fully supported staff members in all roles. So we're ready to help you at any time. If you have questions on how to track your board, how to campaign around the board, there's so many great examples that we have from our locals around the state. So it's great that that we are using these templates and toolkits to make it even easier for folks, because it's so important to get involved in making sure we have the right bosses and that they're doing their jobs. Okay, moving on. Preparing for local elections and runoffs. Now, you heard it earlier, some of you will have not one, but 2 elections to vote for in May. And on May 4th, those local issues on are the focus of your ballot. So those are going to be the school board issues and things that really affect your local livelihood and way of living. Dick talked about the central appraisal districts. Oftentimes people think it only matters if you're a homeowner, how much taxes people are paying or not, but really who is in control of that determines how much businesses pay in taxes or not. You might have heard Buc-ee's is getting $4 million just for building in San Marcos. They were probably going to build there anyway, but their central appraisal district is giving away money. So these are really important things to pay attention to and to vote for the right people, because often, you're going to find someone who is very much the pro public ed candidate and someone who isn't. So very important that we pay attention to those. And also on May 28th, you're going to have the primary runoffs. This is our time to, either the Republican or the Democratic candidate, depending on which primary you voted in, you have to vote in the same runoff for the same party. However, if you did not vote in the primary, and I know a lot of people didn't, I believe only about 14% of eligible voters voted, you can vote in either runoff. So there are some important runoffs and other parties that you might want to consider if you didn't vote during the primary election. So there's still a lot of room to make change and to make sure the right people are going to get elected. Now, next we'll talk about finding people doing the work in your community and joining them. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes there's already a group like Access Round Rock or the Community Voices for Public Ed in Houston. But there's also folks like the ACLU that we mentioned. If you've got a discriminatory hair issue, for instance, or dress code issue, reaching out to them and their local entities is really helpful because they've got local chapters just like we've got local chapters. Same thing with Equality Texas, attending their events, subscribing to their updates. They have some Zoom events and also have volunteer events that you can join in on. And there's always opportunities to come testify at different levels. Like at the school board, you know, ACLU might be working on some school board issues in your area, or Equality Texas might be fighting off some LGBTQ stuff. So there's some really great connections to make. Texas Freedom Network is another great organization that works on progressive issues all around. They report on book banning. They deal with curriculum at the state board level. So we work very closely with them. And they're also interested in the censorship and the pulling of books from our libraries. So don't want to keep you too much longer, but I just want to remind everyone to connect with your local union or your associate member program, because we are organizers and we're constantly training and constantly learning new ways to organize and get better at what we're doing. So it's really important that we stay close with our local affiliates and really know the issues that are going on, because it really helps us to learn what legislation needs to be passed at the state level to stop some of these bad things about what's going on in the local areas. So do sign up this election year, especially for these Educating Texas sessions, because we're going to be talking about democracy, the money that's being in education, that's being poured into political races to try and affect or influence a voucher vote in the upcoming session. So these elections are critically important. You heard President Biden talk recently about the electoral and political power of women. I'm really hoping women will show up in November to show that off. So we've got some chances to stop vouchers yet. So thank you so much. Do want to take any kind of closing questions if anyone's got any, and also remind you all that the CPE credit link is coming up here. So make sure to get your credit for your continuing professional ed for being here. And thank you so much for what you do and for taking the time to be here. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if anyone's got any. Don't want to keep you too much later. Thank you all for being here. I know you have a long day, and it means so much that you come join us on a Zoom when you don't have to. So really appreciate you all. Thank you all. We'll see you at the next Educating Texas. Take care.